Hey YouTube, this is Guy. I'm just trying to make a quick video response to the video that ArcanE LogoS theGhost made. He was pointing to a video, a hangout, where he and JD Kain had been talking about the presuppositionalist argument and specifically related to the problem of solipsism. And in that video, ArcanE LogoS theGhost accuses JD Kain of presenting a fallacious argument called the Quoque Fallacy. And I will link the video in this, but just to give you a shot of what it looks like, that's the video. It's called JD Kain Gets Educated on Logic and Reasoning. Anyhow, the application or the identification of JD Kain's argument as the Quoque Fallacy is actually incorrect, and apparently ArcanE LogoS theGhost is not familiar with it. And I've seen this pop up more frequently by presuppositionalists after the debate between Matt Dillahunty and Seitan Bruggencate, where Seitan Bruggencate also uses or accuses Matt Dillahunty of using the Quoque Fallacy, and Sai misuses it as well. So here's the way that the argument that's going on between ArcanE LogoS and JD Kain goes. ArcanE LogoS says, well, you can't solve the problem of hard solipsism. You have no way to know that you're not a brain in a vat. And JD Kain responds saying, well, it's true essentially that I don't have the answer to that problem. That's why it's identified as a problem in philosophy. There's no known way that we can know absolutely that we are not a brain in a vat. We can't prove that we are not a brain in a vat. And JD Kain says, I don't have the answer to that, and neither do you, ArcanE LogoS. None of us do. Human beings don't have that. And that's when ArcanE LogoS jumps in and says, aha, that's the Quoque Fallacy. It's not. And let me illustrate an analogous argument to try and demonstrate why this is not fallacious reasoning. So imagine that there are two people discussing what a moral life consists of, and person one says, well, the moral life, part of a moral life includes developing all of one's capabilities, all of one's talents. And person two, and then he says in a second premise that he says, you, person two, have not developed your capacity to fly by flapping your arms, and therefore you are not a moral person. So person two responds and says, well, you're right, I cannot fly by flapping my arms, but this is something that no human being can do, and therefore I'm not morally culpable for developing that capacity to flap my wings in order to fly. If person one came back to say, you've committed the Quoque Fallacy, it's not, because in this case he's saying universally no one has the capacity to be able to flap their arms to fly. If person two responded by saying, well, you can't flap your arms to fly either, so my not being able to flap my arms in order to fly is not immoral, that would be the Quoque Fallacy, because he's saying you don't do it either, and so I don't have to do it. He's justifying his position by saying that the other person does what instead he's done by saying universally that's not part of human capacity. He's arguing that we are not morally culpable for things that we are incapable of doing. So, for example, in general, we might say it is moral. There's something moral about raising your children and rearing them and caring for them. But if you're a parent and maybe you've been incapacitated, you were hit by a drunk driver, and you don't have mental faculties anymore to do much of anything, well, that person, generally, we concede that they would be not morally culpable anymore for raising their children. They would be excused because they couldn't do it. That's the kind of thing that person 2 is saying, only he's saying it even more broadly than that. Now, person 1 could come back and say, well, here's a demonstration. And if he flaps his arms and begins to fly by flapping his arms, well, then he's proved that at least one person can do that. And so in the case of, back to the argument between JD Kain and ArcanE LogoS, if ArcanE LogoS came back and said, I can solve that problem, and here is some proof. The burden of proof is really on the person who is making a claim like that. And if that's true, then we might have other logical implications and things like that would fall from that. But as it stands, ArcanE LogoS has made a claim. JD Kain has said your claim is invalid. There's no evidence for that. And ArcanE LogoS has just said, aha, your reasoning is fallacious, but it's not fallacious reasoning. So, and an example of a genuine, or another example of a genuine two Quoque fallacy would be maybe two fathers arguing about being good fathers, and say, so the first father says, well, you're a bad father because you allow your son to watch R-rated movies, and the second father says back, well, you let your son watch R-rated movies too. He's not addressed the base claim that's being made. If he said, well, allowing children to watch R-rated movies is not indicative of the quality of parenting that's being given, or something like that, that addresses the meat, the substance of the argument. But instead, it's just a misdirection, and that's not what's happening in JD Kain's argument there. He is addressing the substance of the issue and saying, you're right. He concedes that the point is made that he cannot prove that he's not a brain in a vat, but he's saying no one else can either. And so that's really all I had to say. ArcanE LogoS and Veckel was kind of a cheerleader in the comment section on that video too, saying, aha, we got him. Both of you guys need to study a little bit more on your logical fallacies. Anyhow, that's all I had to say. Thank you.